Welcome! In my last video, I talked about Polish fortunes during the Great War and how an independent Poland was created in late 1918. In this episode, I will take a look at interwar Poland to see what happened in the country between the two world wars. In November 1918, administration in Warsaw was taken over by Polish civil servants. Jozef Pilsudsky became provisional chief of state, while 400,000 German troops started their peaceful departure. A coalition government was established. Many reforms, like the 8-hour workday, women's suffrage, etc., were introduced, but organizing the military was the most important task, as the country was threatened by its old and new neighbors. Ukrainian forces occupied Lvov, a city with a Polish majority. Clashes broke out in German-controlled Poznan, while negotiations started in Paris regarding future borders. As the Polish armed forces were forming, fighting continued in several areas. A brief conflict with Czechoslovakia in January was followed by confrontation with Lithuania after Polish forces captured Vilnius. The Blue Army then arrived from France by train. Its experienced soldiers participated in the Polish-Ukrainian War, securing Lvov by May 1919, but also committed anti-Semitic atrocities. In June, the Versailles Treaty outlined the new borders, but peace was nowhere near, so Pilsudski believed favorable borders could only be established by military action. His forces launched the Kiev offensive in April 1920, taking the city, but a Soviet counterattack soon threatened Warsaw itself, which was saved in August in yet another reversal. The subsequent Polish advance led to the Peace of Riga in March 1921, establishing the new border between the two states. In the west, in Upper Silesia, 3 Polish uprisings took place. The area was then divided in 1922. Poland was given the coal-rich part. The country was now at peace, but internal problems remained. Already in 1919, a coup attempt took place against Pilsudski. Now a new constitution was accepted, limiting his powers, after which he resigned. His friend, Gabriel Narutowicz, won the election and succeeded him as president, but he was assassinated a few days later. Pilsudski, who was the original target, started doubting that Poland could survive as a democracy, and although he suppressed the unrest as chief of the general staff, he could not work with the new government that included some of his right-wing enemies, so he resigned in July 1923. In the next few years, he led a quiet life, but economic and social troubles continued, with hyperinflation and growing unemployment. Several governments fell. Then, in 1926, when the cabinet of Vincenti Vitos resigned, and a new coalition of the People's Party and the Christian Association took its place, Pilsudski returned to power in a coup, which resulted in 400 dead and 800 wounded. He was supported by his former soldiers, the Socialist Party, the Peasant Party, and the Communist Party, with the public goal of healing Poland. His close friend, Ignacy Mościcki, became president, with limited powers. He himself was appointed Minister of Military Affairs, a post which he would hold for 11 successive governments. The 1928 elections were still free, but all subsequent elections were manipulated, giving most mandates to the government, while opposition activists were sent to prison. An authoritarian regime was established. Pilsudski was its actual leader. He appointed the president, but the parliament's powers were also curbed. He relied on a few trusted allies, mainly President Mościcki, Foreign Minister Joseph Beck, and Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Edward Ritz-Smigli. The Great War left Poland in ruins. Recovery took years. Since the country now encompassed regions that had belonged to different countries and economies, establishing internal transportation and communication links was a challenge. The zloty was introduced in 1924 as the single common currency. It helped control hyperinflation, and while the economy slowly grew, hostility towards neighboring states kept foreign trade at low levels. Germany remained the main economic partner, but frequent customs wars limited growth. Farmers made up 65% of the population, the eastern provinces remained underdeveloped, but the country had a few industrial centers, and the government invested large sums in further development. The Gdynia seaport was built. It was linked by rail to Upper Silesia and its coal mines, but a central industrial district also started to take shape in the late 1930s. The road network was dense, but road quality was low. Poland was too poor to build a highway network. Thanks to compulsory education, illiteracy dropped from 33% to 18%. Besides common schools, middle schools also increased in number. 6 universities and 3 technical colleges accepted tens of thousands of students, 28% of whom were women. Polish scientists achieved significant results. They experimented with TV services, but they also worked on decoding German Enigma machines, with some progress before the war. Theater and poetry remained popular, although the country's western and eastern half showed significant differences in every possible regard. Almost one-third of the population consisted of ethnic minorities. 14% were Ukrainian, 10% were Jewish, 3% were Belarusian, 2% were German. Almost 2 million Poles arrived from the Soviet Union in 2 waves, and relations with the minorities remained an issue. Pilsudsky preferred loyalty to the state. He cared less about ethnicity, but the Great Depression led to further deterioration, while anti-Semitism was still present. Jews did prefer Pilsudsky's regime, but by the time of his death, tensions again started rising. This was an important detail, since 20% of the world's Jews lived in Poland. The ratio of urban population rose to 30%, but minorities were restricted in many ways. Towards the end of the period, anti-Semitic legislation was even drafted, favoring mass emigration. In foreign policy, alliance with the Western powers was favored, along with friendship with Romania and Hungary. Pilsudsky maintained a neutral stance towards Germany and the Soviet Union. A non-aggression pact was signed with the Soviets in 1932, followed by a similar agreement with Germany 2 years later. Pilsudsky had no illusions. Allegedly, he even suggested a preventive war to France when Hitler gained power, but the obvious French reluctance could not be missed. Hitler proposed an anti-Soviet alliance, but Pilsudsky declined this offer. He was trying to avoid direct confrontation. When he died in 1935, his successors turned increasingly towards conservatism and authoritarianism, but they lacked his charisma, while internal problems mounted. Ukrainian terrorists, members of the UON, committed violent acts. Polish persecution of Ukrainians increased. The army was quite large, with almost 1 million enlisted men. 1/3 of the budget was spent on the military. In 1939, they served in 37 infantry divisions, 11 cavalry, and 2 armored brigades, with another 700,000 in reserve. Financial limitations resulted in slow progress. Domestic production of tanks and airplanes remained at low levels. The country lacked foreign currency reserves. 149 7TP tanks were built. Most of them were organized into 2 tank battalions. The PZL company built the P-11 fighters and the PZL-37 medium bombers, while the Navy had a few destroyers and submarines. Following a border incident with Lithuania in March 1938, the latter country was forced to open the border and restore diplomatic relations. In October, after the Munich Agreement, Poland sided with Nazi Germany and demanded that Czechoslovakia cede Teschen with its Polish majority. The area was given up, but a few months later, in March 1939, when Germany invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia, Hitler demanded that Poland join the Anti-Comintern Pact as a German client state. He also desired Danzig, which functioned as a free city in a customs union with Poland, but German territorial demands were rejected. Britain and France promised help in case Germany invaded, but I have already talked about that in a previous video, so this concludes my episode on interwar Poland. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.